rebuilding after the fictional zombie apocalypse. Welcome to the third video in this series. In the first video, I covered some specialized gear that I developed for this series. The camouflage cloak with pockets. And in the second video, I covered weaponry. Which weapons and main gear should one use to survive the zombie apocalypse? How would I deal with this fictional scenario of a zombie apocalypse? And the question I need to ask my audience. The main outbreak has happened. And now you have to decide when to reach out to other survivors and to rebuild civilization. Where should you build? What part of the country should you go to? What other gear do you need? What's the ideal housing or shelter? How does one achieve or find an adequate power supply? And also, knowing thy enemy. We need to talk about the different kinds of zombies. Are we talking about a genetically engineered rabies virus that can infect humans? And in that case, how long would they last? How far can the plague spread? This is a very key question. Or are we dealing with the supernatural, black magic, undead zombies being raised from the dead by some supernatural means? The question we need to ask, does the decaying process stop after a certain point, or does it continue? If it continues, especially in warmer seasons, the rate of decay would be so rapid, the zombies simply would not last for very long. The decay process would be so rapid that it'll probably only last a couple of days at best. But if through dark magic, the decaying process either is arrested or stops at a certain point, how long would the zombie last? And would their existence be more or less indefinite until they're destroyed? Also, we have to ask the question, by what measure are they able to be controlled? A plague zombie, for example, I do not think it can be managed or manipulated or directed. But once we go into the supernatural realm, it's possible for these zombies to be controlled by some magical means by an individual or a group of individuals. And if this is the case, a zombie outbreak could occur in a city, and they can overrun that particular city, then being directed through magic. They could march on over to another city, overrun that city, then overrun another city, and eventually overrunning whole nations. So the supernatural zombie, the very fact that they can be controlled also means they can be directed. And if they can be directed, they're significantly more dangerous because they can actually achieve goals and objectives of those controlling them. So one must really meditate on this. How long can the zombie last? What kind of zombie? And can these zombies be directed? And also one must determine if they're being controlled by some individual or individuals using dark magic. What are their motivations? What are their end goals? And if we're dealing with supernatural forces, would religious textbooks, icons, holy water, relics be of use in helping you survive the zombie apocalypse? But regardless of the case, keeping a low profile and avoiding conflict would be the best course of action, simply because any conflict or any armed conflict one engages in, there's the potential for injury and death. So evading conflict, camouflage, a low profile, and more or less finding an isolated area to set up base camp, I think would be essential for survival. But what part of the country would I move to? Or what part of the country I think is best? I believe British Columbia, Canada would be the best place to go during the zombie apocalypse. Or perhaps an island nation because of its isolation. But in British Columbia, there's plenty of rain, there's game that can be hunted, and there's ample amounts of fresh water. I would probably find a campsite or a cabin by a river. The river itself, a source of fresh water, sanitation, hygiene, a source of food, even a source of power if you have the right equipment. Also a source of transportation. So selecting a campsite or a cabin near a source of water such as this, plus the salmon run, you have ample amounts of food, you have ample amounts of fresh water. This cannot be undervalued. So this is where I would probably go during the zombie apocalypse. Next on the agenda, food. What kind of food would I grow to support myself and others? I put a lot of thought into this. I think the basic potato, because the potato has a lot of nutritional value in it, and it's very hearty. Next, I would grow kale. Now you can also find certain strands of kale that's very resilient to snowfall or to cooler temperatures. And kale is considered one of the superfoods because it's very rich in iron. Something that will be very essential in keeping one's health up and to feed others. I've had a lot of luck over the years growing kale. It's not that difficult, and it's incredibly nutritious. So between the potato and the kale plant, I would probably focus on these to be my main agricultural food supply. But next, one also needs to learn to hunt for a ready source of protein. One could simply feed the wildlife in the local area so they're very fat and friendly. But one would also need to learn what animals are safe to eat and what animals one should avoid. Such knowledge would be essential for survival and rebuilding civilization. Now on rebuilding civilization, how do you come across other survivors? How would you introduce yourself to other survivors? How quickly do you think you could figure out who can be trusted and who can be avoided? Whose story is to be believed or who is lying? So when it comes to rebuilding civilization, these are questions that have to be asked and decisions that have to be made promptly and accurately. This, I think, would prove to be very difficult to do. I would personally take my time and ask people questions. then interview them again and ask them the same questions. Over the years, I've learned people who are liars, in some cases, people who are mentally unstable, if you ask them the same question repeatedly, they'll often give different answers. I've used this technique before to determine if someone is either lying or are they just simply unstable. This is one technique I've used over the years in dealing with people. But also stopping and thinking, does their stories make sense? And also look how their eye movements work. For example, the NLP eye patterns. This can be a very strong indication if someone is lying. By watching their eye patterns, that can actually reveal what systems they're using. Are they using their imagination? Are they using their memory? Are they paying attention to their emotions? Are they paying attention to their inner dialogue? The NLP eye patterns can be a great tool in determining if someone is lying or telling the truth. But this topic alone could take hours and hours and still be incomplete. So that's something you really need to ask yourself. When rebuilding civilization, how can you tell if other survivors are trustworthy? Wrestle with this question and ask yourself this question. How would you tell if someone's telling the truth? How can you tell if someone is trustworthy? How long will it take to determine should you team up with this group of survivors? Next, I'll talk about shelter. I think keeping a low profile is key. A small cabin would be ideal because it will require less wood or less gas to heat. Or a small shelter. Remember, keeping low profile increases your chances of survival. The less wood you have to burn, the less smoke. Lots of smoke can give away your position. So I'd do my best to keep that at a minimum. You do have to cook your food, and you do have to stay warm. So maybe investing in a metal fire pit or something metal, or something that retains heat very, very well, so you can get by with smaller fires. This, I think, would be very essential for survival post-apocalypse. But on the matter of gas, most people don't realize gasoline has a limited shelf life. A lot shorter than most people would think. So yes, a Jeep or a dirt bike is a great way to get around. But gasoline will start to go bad after a while. Propane does last much longer. But can you find a steady supply of propane? And again, with transportation. As I said earlier, a campsite that is located near a river is essential for a number of reasons. So if you can get yourself an electrical car or an electrical bike or an e-bike, and once you attain the means to recharge the battery, I think this is a better option than gasoline or petrol powered automobiles. Anything electric. I mean, once you have a solar power, wind power, hydropower, once you obtain these, you will have the means to recharge your main source of transportation. The next best thing may be a donkey or a horse if you can attain one after the apocalypse. It's also a fantastic option. But you have to ask the question, will a horse spook if it comes in contact with zombies? That's another thing you have to consider. But if as a pack animal, or something that can carry a large amount of items across long distances, that alone could be something worthwhile to invest in. Now on the matter of miscellaneous gear, I think additional pocket knives would be on the top list simply because they're versatile and they've been in high demand and you can trade them. But also, there may or may not be a good source of water. So the life straw, I definitely have that in my kit. And also one of these water lilies, or these hydro or wind powered turbines. That's another piece that's in my kit. I've also added a tactical vest. This one I believe is a South African design. I'm very content with it. It's very practical. I mean, you can put your compass, you can put your fire starter, you can put your water canteens. It's a very versatile piece of equipment. And it's also excellent for carrying small items. And I've also included a Maxpedition backpack. This one is lighter than the other ones, and I decided to stay as light as possible. Remember, speed is life. The more mobile you are, the more easily you can get away. Or if you do choose to stand and fight, the more mobile you are, the more likely you can achieve tactical superiority by taking the high ground, if the situation merits that. So, here are my picks, and here is my opinion on what I would do and things I would look into to give myself a fighting chance to survive the zombie apocalypse.